Welcome friends to another r/malicious compliance video. If you want to be an awesome person today, all you gotta do is hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. That said, our first story of the day is by Note of Ranvier. Refused database access and told to submit tickets, so I submit tickets. Okay, I've been meaning to type this up for a while. This happened in my last job back in 2018. To give some background, I was working as a data analyst at a company in the edtech sector. For one of my projects, I created a report that we could give to the sales team that they could then use when asking clients to renew their contract. Clients were typically school systems or individual schools. The report was all graphs, even adults like pretty pictures, and it showed the client's data on how teachers/students were using the product. Then our sales guy could show, hey, X% of your students and teachers are using this X times a week, so you should sign a new contract with us. I developed this report for our biggest client and had the top people in sales all put in input when developing it. The big client renewed, which was great. They loved the report and wanted to use it for all renewals, and we had 5,000 plus clients. I had to automate the process, and everything seemed peachy until I hit a problem. The data for the report was pulled from our database, MS SQL if you're curious. Now, I was in the research department and I didn't have access to the database. Instead, our IT team had access to the database. If I wanted data, I had to put in a ticket, name all the data points I wanted, and I could only name one client per ticket. Also, IT did their work in sprints, which are basically 2-week periods of work. The ticket were always added to the next sprint, so I ended up having to wait 2 to 4 weeks for data. This was fine for the big client report, but now that I was running this report for all renewals, the ticket system was not going to work. Now, if you've worked with sales, you know that they don't typically plan out 2 to 4 weeks ahead. At least, they didn't at this company. I reached out to IT and requested direct access to the database so I could stop putting in tickets and just pull, query, the data myself. Well, that was immediately denied. All data requests will be filled by only IT, and as a research person, I needed to stay in my lane. You might see where this is going. I wasn't happy and sales wasn't happy with the delay, but there was nothing anyone could do. So I reached out to one of the sales managers to discuss a solution. Since data was going to take 2 to 4 weeks to arrive, could he please send me everyone that has a renewal coming up in the next 2 to 4 weeks? With 5,000 plus customers, that averages about 100 renewals a week. He smiled and understood what was going on, and happily sent me a list of 400-ish clients. Quick note, the IT team spends the day before a sprint planning the next sprint, and all tickets submitted before the sprint had to be completed during the next sprint. The sprint planning time was always Friday afternoon because the least amount of tickets rolled in. During the planning session, they would plan all the work for the next 2 weeks for the next sprint. Any tickets that came in before 5 p.m. Friday had to be finished over the next 2 weeks. Time for my malicious compliance. Armed with my list of 400 plus clients, I figured out when the next sprint started and cleared my schedule for the day before the new IT sprint started, aka their sprint planning Friday. At about 1 minute per ticket, it was going to take about 6 hours and 40 minutes to submit all the tickets. So that's what I spent my whole Friday doing. Let's not forget, they had to get the data for all the tickets during the next sprint as long as I submitted them before 5 p.m. on Friday. That meant they had to take care of all 400 tickets in the next 2 weeks, plus I submitted tickets throughout their spring planning meeting, so they couldn't even plan for it all. If you're not tech savvy, this might not make sense, but if you are, let me add an extra twist to this. They used Jira at the time, and the entire IT team had the Jira app on their laptops. Most of them had push notifications set up so they got pinged every time a ticket was submitted. I would have paid good money to be a fly on the wall during that meeting, watching a new ticket pop up about every minute. Okay, tech aside done, I didn't hear a peep from them at all that Friday. To their credit, Monday I started getting data for my tickets. Now, I had automated the reporting process on my end, so each report only took me a few minutes to run. I was churning out reports as quickly as I received the data without an issue, and sales was loving it. I saw tickets coming in from every member of the IT team, and during the second week, many tickets came in after working hours, so obviously they were struggling to keep up. Again, I'll give them full credit, they fulfilled every single ticket, but there was a lot of long days for them. Everyone was salary, so no overtime pay either. This, of course, on top of all the other tickets they needed to complete, so it was quite a stressful sprint. Undeterred, I met with the sales manager again right before the next sprint and asked for the next set of clients with renewals. Then the day before the next sprint, I began submitting tickets again. My workday started at 9 a.m. and by 10 a.m., the head of IT runs over to me. He's bug-eyed and asked me how many tickets I was planning on submitting. I told him the same amount as last time. I only had 200 this time, but he didn't know that. And I'm pretty sure I saw him break on the inside. I did feel bad at this point, so I said, alternatively, you could just give me access to the database, and I could query the data myself. I had the access before noon. In most cases, I understand a normal restriction of what you can and can't do, but if it's to the point where it's imposing on somebody else doing their job, sometimes you gotta compromise. If you were doing your job, and there was one thing that if given access to would speed up your job greatly, would you be willing to do what OP did here and drop a ton of work on those people that handle that system in a bid to try to make them realize how good it would be if they just gave you access? Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is by Modified Rabbit. Your job isn't that hard. So a long while back, I picked up a part-time job at Applebee's for dishwasher. When I got there and was training for a week, there was always at least 2 people washing them and often 3 during dinner rush. I was also trained as a cook, which isn't what I applied for, but I'm always more than happy to help where needed and do the best I can at jobs. To help understand why some of the things mentioned later matter so much, when it comes to dinner rush, the cooks will absolutely need certain plates at certain times. They had to be on specific shaped or sized dishes depending on the orders, so in many of the contracts for servers, they're actually required to place like plates on top of each other in the dishwashing area when they drop them off. So back to the story. Once my training was over, in about a week, I quickly ended up being the only person on my shifts doing dishes. I was fine with this for the most part, as I pride myself in working hard, efficiently, and doing really well if I'm able, and was very proud that I was able to do well enough that they didn't have to have 2 to 3 people working back there when it was my shift. The only issue which other dishwashers had was that the servers, who were all teenage girls, would just toss plates onto the area for the dishes to be washed. This caused huge issues with finding the correct plates needed, when needed, and often caused a hazard for the washer when trying to sift through these horrible piles of dishes that could easily topple over and break at any moment, due to them not being placed properly on top of like shape or size. This was tolerable during regular slow hours, but during dinner rush, it was a nightmare and caused a lot of stress for not only the dishwasher, but the cooks, which would also cause food to get out later than it needed to. Eventually, I started to toss the plastic appetizer trays back over onto the side of the area that the waitresses walked, in hopes that they would maybe think that, oh, this stuff is actually falling over. Maybe I should place these up here better. Nope, they'd just chuck it back up there and walk off. I kept this up for a while to where they finally figured out that it was happening too often for it just to be a coincidence, and one saw me toss it over. Her and I got into a very loud argument as she decided to accuse me of throwing it directly at her when she wasn't anywhere near it. So of course the manager comes in because we're yelling and things aren't getting done. She tells the girl that it is her job to place plates there properly and that they needed to do it right, and made sure to tell all of the waitresses this, which was nice. She told me to go ahead and take a break outside real fast to cool off. I did. For the next week, all was well and right with things at work, and the waitresses were doing their jobs properly. Granted, they'd make snide remarks to me as they did almost the whole time, but I could ignore that. I just wanted to be able to properly do my work, and before they had to do theirs properly, I couldn't do mine, and so on for the cooks. The cooks loved that I got done and were fairly fond of me. This is where the story gets into fitting this Reddit group. So it only lasts around a week and the same behavior starts back up. So obviously I start doing what I did before as well, and the same waitress gets into it with me again over it. This time though, the manager sends her off and decides to scold me because she didn't want to keep dealing with the whole issue in waitresses. I told her it's their job to do this properly, and that it's hindering me from doing mine well and the cooks from doing theirs well in return. I told her that she needed to do her job and to get the waitresses to do theirs properly. Her response? She said she wasn't a babysitter, that I was just OCD, and that my job wasn't that hard. Big mistake on her part. It was dinner rush, and while I love to do good work, I don't tolerate being treated poorly at work and blamed for issues that aren't my fault. So I told her that if she didn't want to be a babysitter, to not hire kids that can't even do what a kindergartner can do by matching the same plates to each other, and that I was done. I walked off and went to her office to return the shoes, etc. I got from the job. As I was doing this, I could hear her cursing a huge amount back in the kitchen area, trying to find 4 cooks and waitresses to do the job only I was doing during dinner rush. I wonder where that "your job's not that hard" mentality went. Around a week later, I was at a bar and one of the cooks had come in and was talking to me, pretty much begging me to come back. Nah. It's pretty clear that the manager had a very specific set of priorities. Either she was too chummy with the waitresses, maybe she felt bad about disciplining the teenage girls that do the job. Whatever it was pretty clear that after the first instance, they were willing to look past the fact that the girls were not doing their job properly and downplay the performance of the dishwasher. If it makes things harder on them when they leave because they were treated badly, they got nobody else to blame. Our next story is by Creepy Analyst. Bank won't let me withdraw all funds? Okay. I moved from Pennsylvania to Michigan a few years ago and only go home once a year or so. A few years back, I transferred the vast majority of my bank account to Michigan, but they were giving me a hard time about closing the account, so I withdrew all funds except for $1.31. I haven't touched the account since that time, so 2 years later I get a notice for inactivity stating that I'll be charged $5 if my account remains inactive for 2 years. I spoke with 3 different people on the phone, but they wouldn't let me close out the account without incurring a fee. And since I'm never moving back to that town, I refused to pay them or add any money to the account. Cue malicious compliance. So I have to interact with the account once every 2 years or else pay you $5? Fine. Give me 1 cent, please. When I was there in person last month, I withdrew 1 penny from the account, so now it's good for another 2 years. The attendant definitely gave me a weird look, but at this rate, my account will remain open for the next 260 years. What kind of bank refuses to let you close your account without a fee, especially when there's only $1.31 in it? If they're gonna be that restrictive about it, I start going out of my way to find ways to make that 1 cent cost them money. Whether it's like checks or anything like that just has some kind of overhead, or if you get free checks, which you have to pay to close the account, I doubt it from this place, but if you did, you make them pay that overhead. And our final story of the day is by mbright28. I'm sure he can help me if you can't. During the 2008 recession, I had lost my job. One of my friends managed a Blockbuster Video and was able to get me working there a few nights a week. He rarely came in at night and it was managed by a younger employee that we'll call Chelsea. Chelsea was 19 and I was 31 at the time. This will be important later. Chelsea did a great job running things when my friend wasn't there and really knew her stuff. She really enjoyed her job and the customers really liked her. One night, I'm checking in returns and I hear a lady getting really frustrated with her. She was wanting her to waive a ton of late fees and credit her for a movie that she said was terrible. We definitely didn't credit people for movies because they didn't like them, and sometimes they would credit late fees. She pleaded her case to Chelsea for 15 to 20 minutes, and Chelsea continued to explain that she's had too many credits already. As I'm putting movies back in stock, I feel a tap on my shoulder. It's the same lady and she insists that I help her. I walk up to the front and stand next to Chelsea. I play dumb and ask what's going on. She points at me and looks at Chelsea dead in the eye and says, "He can help me since you won't." I ask what's going on and make her explain everything over again for 15 minutes. As soon as she's done, I tell her that I'll need to talk to my boss before I can get that approved. She asks, "Well, who's your boss then?" I look her dead in the eye and point right at Chelsea. That lady stormed out the door so fast, we never saw her again. You gotta love people who come in and just plead and beg and expect to get some kind of preferential treatment over and over and over again. It's great when places give you a common courtesy, but you can't just expect it all the time constantly. Especially not in like a movie business and you're just like, "I didn't really like the movie, can I get a credit?" Maybe a time or two, but you're not going to get it every single time, Karen. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So of all these stories I've read today, which is your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet, if you could like and subscribe, that would mean a lot to me. Whatever you do, whether it's liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, all of it helps grow this channel and I appreciate the heck out of it. So until next time, I'll see you all tomorrow with some more stories.